My name is Nayan Chanda. I'm editor-in-chief of YaleGlobal Online, and we are delighted to have with us in our studios President Donald Kaberuka, the President of African Development Bank Group. You're the second-term president, and we're delighted to have you with us.
Thank you.
You have been in this business of development for a long time. You are Minister of Finance. At Rwanda, you brought some tremendous changes to the country. And now, as President of the African Development Bank, you have the responsibility for a much larger area of development. Now, to start with, Africa has 600 million hectares of uncultivated land. So it could become the world's food granary. So what is preventing Africa from developing that potential?
Well, agricultural productivity is always the foundation for transiting from low income to middle income. That is true for Asia, places like China, Japan, Vietnam, and many others. So you're right that increasing productivity in agriculture, there's where jobs will be created. That's where we shall begin to join the global agricultural value chains. So you have an important point. But it takes more than simply land to do that. We missed the green revolution, and now we're taking all the measures to ensure that we can increase agricultural productivity. Now, in the 80s and 90s, there were issues with the macroeconomic policies, which favored urban dwellers. Overvalued exchange rates, over taxation of farmers, poor support systems, poor infrastructure. That has been corrected. Now we need to take measures on the supply side, things like infrastructure, water management, modern seeds, better technologies. So I think important things are underway, but in my judgment, it all begins with sound infrastructure, better support to farmers, and diminishing the post-harvest losses. Because in some countries, even when food has been produced, 40% of it is lost after the harvest because of poor infrastructure.
Okay. So in other words, lack of roads or transportation to take food?
Yeah, absolutely, warehousing, transportation, and so on. And all this is resolved by infrastructure, ensuring that market signals can work. But let me end though. Something which has happened, which is extremely interesting, has been the use of mobile phone technology for farmers to access market information. But also the increasing use of commodity exchanges, agricultural commodity exchanges for price discovery. These two things are helping enormously in increasing agricultural production.
So this is in some ways infrastructure, communication infrastructure helping agriculture.
So you have hard infrastructure, roads, water system, then the information infrastructure via mobile phone system and via the agricultural commodity exchanges.
So can you give one example of how this mobile telephone infrastructure is helping agriculture?
All right, imagine a farmer in the rural areas, so he has good harvests of tomatoes or potatoes. So two options. They can carry their produce to the market, or they can wait for collectors to come and buy it. But the chances are this farmer does not know the price in the market. But with the mobile phone, they know exactly what the market price is.
And which market is closer?
Which market. So they will calculate the issues of arbitrage, so the middlemen don't collect most of the rent. It has been extremely important in increasing.
Which are the countries which have done this more than others?
Kenya is a leader. Kenya is a leader, but others are following as well.
But Kenya has been supplying fresh vegetables to Europe for some time now, right?
It's one of the countries where farmers did have joined the global value chains, mainly in floriculture and horticulture, and also cereals. They have a history of that. But in many other countries, it is still far below what Kenya is doing.
Right. The other issue is the Africa's massive reserve of oil. Africa's oil reserves, I think you wrote, it amounts to almost half of Saudi Arabia's. And yet, country like Nigeria cannot even produce enough electricity for its own use. So what is the cost for this?
Look, you touched on an important point. Perhaps one of the most important points in Africa this time. Whether it is oil, natural gas, or some other minerals, we absolutely have to figure out this time how to get it right. In terms of using the rent to build infrastructure, to invest in human development, but also to, as you put it well, convert some of that into energy that we need. What was it that was missing? The policy framework, the policy environment, the enabling environment. Now it is gelling together, and things are beginning to happen. Nigeria, which you mentioned now, is beginning a major reform in the energy sector. And I think the mistakes we made in the past, we have learned from them.
So the question of infrastructure, how does the bank help countries? What are the mechanisms in which your organization can help individual African countries to develop infrastructure?
Look, Africa has a gap. The needs every year about $90 billion. Now, from all sources available, we can raise maybe $52 billion. So there's still a gap. So the first thing we need to figure out is how to fill that gap. Because public sources are limited. So that's the first thing we want to figure out with governments.
The gap about 40 billion.
Exactly. The second thing is how to make it possible for the private sector to bring capital into the infrastructure area, things like energy, as they have done on optic fibers, submarine cables, and IT. Want to attract independent power producers. But for that to happen, you need a regulatory framework, policy predictability. So that is the second bit. So fill the gap, look for innovative ways, figure out how to bring in private capital into infrastructure. And thirdly, we're very keen to promote, to accelerate the development of Africa's single market. So regional infrastructure for us is very important, whether it is transport corridors, whether it is power pools, whether it is trade facilitation, all those things come together. Because remember, infrastructure is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end, which is trade, movement of goods, people, and services.
So in trying to attract private capital to infrastructure, you have to observe, as you said, the good regulatory structure and enforcement of regulations. And that brings the question of governance.
Right.
So you have to have, because so much of African resources have been spirited away by poor governance and corruption. And how does the bank deal with that issue, governance?
Let me tell you about corruption in natural resources. It is true that lack of transparency, lack of accountability in the oil and gas sector has been a challenge for us. And we are dealing with that by increasing transparency, accountability, along the entire value chain. But the second hidden face, which people don't know, is that Africa has not been getting the real value of its resources. Sometimes contracts are lopsided, so that is production sharing, whether the royalties, or that other forms of taxation, governments did not get a fair share of what was due to them because of management models of the extractive industry. That too has to change. But thirdly, it's about getting a bit of value instead of exporting the entire raw product. Someone was mentioning today a mineral called coltan, which is a
cell phone.
Colombo tantalite for cell phones. Now, you know that between the one who produces the coltan and the one who sells phones, you know who gets the value. So we'll have to get a bit of the value of those minerals. And so for me, the three things are related: greater accountability, greater transparency. Number two, let us ensure these contracts, the mining models are right. And thirdly, let us get more value from our raw materials.
It's like setting up a oil refinery. Africa doesn't have an oil refinery, right?
There are a couple of refineries, but some of them operate below capacity. What I would like to see would be countries sharing development of the infrastructure around the resources, pipelines, refineries, because often you have two neighboring countries discovering large amounts of gas like Tanzania and Mozambique. That requires huge amount of infrastructure, but the resources involved are often a multiple of the GDP of the country.
Yeah.
So pooling resources would be better for all of them, from negotiation to value add, which I've just mentioned.
So there have been a lot of reports about Chinese building infrastructure. Is that infrastructure built essentially for Chinese extractive industries, or is it for general use?
There's a lot of misunderstanding on this one. Not simply Chinese. If you take all the emerging markets, Turkey, Brazil, India, and others, the total amount of money which has come into infrastructure is about $25 billion per year. Now, I agree with you that China is perhaps leading the pack. But the beauty of the Chinese deals is that they are looking for oil, gas, or minerals, and we are looking for infrastructure. So we make a deal.
Yeah.
We make a deal. We sell the oil, you put the money in an extra account, you pay the Chinese. They bring the engineers, equipment, they do railways, maritime ports, airports, highways. It's much better than the past models where we have got the money in the country. They appreciate the exchange rate, you have the Dutch disease, agriculture is destroyed. Now we've got a way of getting what we want, which is turning the rent from oil into infrastructure. And the Chinese, of course, getting oil they need for the industries.
And how about agriculture? There's some report the Chinese are also trying to get some land to grow crops. Is there?
I'm not aware of that. All I know is that we welcome investment in agribusiness from the US, from Europe, the Gulf, but agribusiness is done in other countries. But this thing called YaleGlobal, which I think is what we are referring to, is not the China-Africa problem, to my knowledge. I do think sometimes it is blown out of proportions, because what you're looking for is investment in agriculture, period.
Yeah. So your oath ceremony, second time, had to be away from Abidjan because of security issues. So the security issue, how big an obstacle it is to development in Africa today?
It's not a security issue as such. Much of Africa is stable. I would say 92% of Africa is stable. With the remain 8% where sometimes you have peacekeeping forces from the United Nations or from African Union. Much of Africa is stable. But what is actually happening is that there are so many changes taking place in Africa. Demographics, urbanization, natural resources, young people, diaspora, all this. And you have got these forces, continent evolution. As they say in physics, you have got centrifugal forces, you have centripetal forces. And those are things you have to manage. So often there is a slippage, it becomes a security problem. As in South Sudan, as in the Central African Republic. It takes a stolen election. It takes a budget transition. It takes some other political problem. It explodes. This is what happened in the case of the Ivory Coast. There was a difficult transition. Then there was a military takeover. Then there was a decade-old crisis. So the bank had to relocate to some other country,
Right.
which was Tunisia.
Yeah.
Just to say that 6 years into our relocation, there was a revolution in Tunisia as well.
Yes.
Because again of the issues of mismanagement of the economic system and the politics of the country.
Yeah. But overall, you think that Africa is on its way up?
I think there's no controversy there. There's no controversy because what is driving the current momentum are basically three things. There is increased investment, foreign direct investment. There is growing domestic consumption. And thirdly, now the policy environment is getting stronger and stronger every day, so we're reaping the benefits. There's a tendency to think that what is happening in Africa is only a function of commodity prices. That is one of the factors. And so I do think that the strong projections for this year, 6.2%, will be maintained. Some countries like Ethiopia will do even more. I suspect though, the big risk is the one I just mentioned to you, is change, force of change on the political and social scene, lack of jobs, young people, lack of inclusion, which creates so much frustration and potential for explosion.
That is very, very helpful, Mr. President. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. We're done.